Hello and welcome to Mike's Mets Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pashota, and a happy Sunday to you. We witnessed the debut of pitcher Christian Scott last night, pitching against the Rays, and the Mets ultimately losing that game 3-1. And we're going to be talking about Scott's performance and what the Mets are really looking for with the new generation of prospects that are coming up in the post-Baby Mets world. First things first, it's been a little bit of an absence since my last episode, and that was just due to me being horrendously sick a couple weeks ago, and me not really getting my voice back. Couldn't really breathe. Was a lot of wheezing, so I was dealing with a lot of that going on. Finally feeling ready to kind of resume, and I was going to do one on Friday, but things got too busy on that way, and then I wanted to wait until the Christian Scott after they announced that they were calling him up before I recorded another episode, and because I really wanted to see what he was like, how he performed, and how that was going to compare just to the performance from Jose Quintana the night prior, that who completely was just blown out by the Rays. But let's talk about the Mets 3-1 loss last night. So it was Christian Scott's debut. He does not get the loss in the decision. He ultimately got the no decision for it because when he left the game, they were still tied 1-1. The Mets offense, which was definitely like running all cylinders in game one of that series. Completely absent in this one. They were held to 1 run on 6 hits, just completely outdueled in that way, and did not appear to be fully in that game at all. You saw just bad performances from Alonso, Lindor, McNeil. But Christian Scott, absolutely terrific. And there's been a lot of hype surrounding Scott for the last couple of years, basically since he was in Double-A last year. And seeing how well he performed. The Mets pitching farm system does not have a lot of great pitching prospects, and we're going to discuss some of the other guys who are coming after him, how far away they are. But Scott was clearly the top prospect. There was certainly the question as to why they were calling him up so early in the season. He felt like more of a prospect to be called up much later on in the scheme of things. Ultimately, they call him up now. Turns out to be a good time because I think the Mets pitching staff could probably use some reinforcements here. Scott was doing very well in AAA. He had pitched to a 2-0 record over 5 starts, I believe, 5 or 6 starts. Had a 3.20 ERA and 36 strikeouts in 23 innings, if I recall that correctly. But he looked absolutely fantastic. It was actually pretty amazing to see how well he had performed in that span of time. And in AAA, it's not easy. You know, they have the automatic balls and strike system going on there. Certainly, pitching prospects that come up from AA who might be succeeding encounter a lot more resistance in AAA. You're facing tougher hitting, as well as a different balls and strike system that you're used to dealing with. So it's pretty different. But Scott had done amazingly well. I think the biggest thing about Scott is the fact that his control is so advanced. He has terrific pinpoint location on all of his pitches, including his off-speed stuff. He seems to know where everything's going. And it was 36 strikeouts and 25 and a third innings pitched in AAA this year when they called him up. Only 6 walks allowed, so he is very smart in terms of keeping the ball where he needs to go. Probably the biggest thing against him is the fact that he had given up 7 home runs in 25 innings. I mean, that's not great. Definitely what led to his ERA climbing up to 3.2. But he was overall an extremely interesting prospect going into this. Was in the top 100 Baseball America prospects. He was on the MLB pipeline top 100. This is a guy who people saw as a potential starter for the team and was going to be called up. Wasn't sure when it was going to be, but they call him up. He performs amazingly well, and it really can't be like overstated how well he performed in this. He was going up against the Tampa Bay Rays, who have not gotten off to a great start, but certainly are a team that most people expect to be in playoff contention this year, as they are almost every year. So he was facing certainly a very advanced team from that perspective, and a very experienced team. So not the easiest of call-up duties. He's on the road. This wasn't going to be in front of a home crowd, so he was going to be facing some adversity in that regard. Calls up, pitches 6 2/3 innings, 5 hits, 1 earned run allowed, and strikes out 6 while only allowing 1 walk. No home runs allowed. He runs into trouble really 2 times, which is the first and fifth inning. The first inning, he's in bases loaded situation, has to get and gives up a run, but is able to work his way out of a jam. He gets a strikeout on Randy Arozarena with just a fastball, just blows it through by him at 96, 97 miles an hour. Impressive to see. I like it. Scott's velocity doesn't like jump off the page as like, wow, that's amazing. But he is consistently throws it in the mid 90s, and he has a really good motion. I like the way he throws. So he just blows a fastball by Randy Arozarena of the Rays, and then is able to get a double play to get out of the inning. It was terrific work, and you can see he was pumped up. He really shows his emotions on his sleeve. I mean, this is a guy who is he's very demonstrative on the mound, and you could see he was pumped up, excited. He had a lot going for him, and then to get out of that first inning with just 1 earned run allowed, very good job on his part. Because it looked like it was going to be a completely blown up inning, and the Rays were going to take maybe a 4-run lead at that point. But gets out of the jam, and then just starts putting guys away at that point. He was it looked really good from his mechanics from that point of view. His off speed stuff is the thing that's really discussed about Scott, is the fact that he is able to throw this stuff really, really good. I mean, he's got a good changeup, but the pitch that gets a lot of attention is the slider sweeper. And actually, I had to look back and see when exactly they started using it as a term. Because actually, I don't recall them using it before, but it was a term that was kind of originated last year, which was to designate this like horizontal sweeping to the left or right slider that's a little bit slower than a traditional pitch, and it's going around like low to mid 80s, and he throws that really effectively against right-handed hitters. I mean, they were unable to pick it up all night. It was a great job by him in that regard, and he, as I said before, he looks just very confident on the mound. He threw 6 2/3 innings and did it in less than 100 pitches. I think the rest of the Mets pitching staff could definitely take a cue from Scott's performance, which was basically don't be so scared, don't nibble so much. I don't know if they have quite the stuff that Christian Scott's throwing with. I mean, his stuff is really good, but he was just very economical with his pitch count for a guy who struck out 6 in 6 2/3 innings. I mean, wasn't like he was just throwing the contact the entire time. He was looking to get the strikeout, and when he got it, he certainly made everyone very aware that he got the strikeout. You could see he was just pumped up several times on the mound, and he was just elated when he was able to get out of any kind of like major problems without any damage. And looked terrific. It was a great debut from a Mets star, which we haven't seen honestly that much. Like debuts for the Mets pitchers haven't gone. It's been a long time since the days of Syndergaard, Harvey, DeGrom, Matz. Those days kind of long gone in terms of like the quality of like pitching that we've been seeing from Mets prospects coming up. So this was like a breath of fresh air. I was just like, wow. Like I forgot how good like you could see a guy coming up would be, and he looks quite good. And probably the biggest question that people have about him is that can this guy actually pitch a full season? He is, as a pro, never pitched over 100 innings, and he's been in the minors for like 3 years now, and he never threw over 100 innings pitched, and it's just to either problems, injury problems, or he had to take time off. It was things that were just kind of like out of his control. And so the question is, if they're calling him up now, it's like almost likely that he's going to be pitching well over 100 innings. by the end of the season. Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like 120 to 130, unless they shut him down at some point. But we're about to see like an unprecedented amount of from Scott, and this is like a workload for a young pitcher. These are the things that don't always go well. So it's going to be a big test for Christian Scott. I think, based on his demeanor, he is like very confident. Like he had said after the game that he knew his stuff would work at this level. He's like, I know I can pitch. I'm a major league baseball caliber pitcher. That is pretty like, yeah, like there are people who come up and they're like, oh yeah, no, I'm just happy to be here, happy to help. It's not the case. There is a Matt Harvey kind of a quality to him in terms of his confidence and demeanor. Harvey was the same way. Harvey came up and was just like, yeah, I'm a great pitcher. Like, let me show you how good I am. And it was certainly that kind of like similar kind of demeanor and feel to him. And he does seem quite confident. And we're going to see how that confidence kind of goes for the course of the season. I mean, he was very pumped up for his debut, and kind of managing emotions is sort of the aspect of being a major league pitcher. You can't just be that fired up all the time, or you're going to get burned out probably pretty soon. Probably the coaches have told him that already, that you could maybe take it down a notch when you're doing it. But I guess if it works for him, then I guess he should keep doing it. But Christian Scott, terrific debut from him. This is where we have to talk about the rest of the Mets prospects, which is that Scott's debut was kind of heralded. He's the one that's doing the best on the AAA pitching staff. There are technically two guys who are also on the AAA staff that we may see later this year. I'm not totally convinced that we will, but those are Mike Vassell and Dom Hamill, who are also in Syracuse with Scott, or were with Scott in Syracuse, and neither pitcher is doing particularly well, but most expected that those two would be called up at some point if the Mets were in need of pitching help. They could go quickly and grab Vassell or Hamill. To say they're doing badly is kind of an understatement. I mean, Vassell has like a 10 ERA. Hamill, not much better. I mean, Hamill is just like striking people out, but Vassell's been like absolutely terrible. So those two guys are not really in a position to really help. The next Mets pitcher who may eventually make an appearance, and he's in Double-A, so there is certainly he's a ways away in terms of being called up, and we've seen people called up from Double-A before, but it would feel a little premature to say that he's coming up anytime soon. If it happens, he'll be called up to Triple-A, maybe for a handful of starts, and then up to the Mets. Maybe by the end of the year, you might be looking at him as a potential September call-up. But that's Blade Tidwell, and Tidwell's been the name that's been floated around probably the most after Scott, as this guy is a major league caliber starter. He has the stuff, he has the confidence, he has the demeanor. Everything about him screams this guy is a rotation level caliber pitcher. He's been doing excellent thus far in Double-A. He has pitched to the tune of a 1.23 ERA, 36 Ks in 29 innings. It's looked absolutely impressive. And Double-A, Christian Scott did a great job in Double-A. So it's a matter of how do you translate that to Triple-A and then the major league level. So that is going to be the question for Tidwell. But Tidwell is a guy that they are floating around the idea of that. Yeah, that guy could get a call up late in the year and just see where exactly he is and if he can pitch at this level. He is very interesting, but they don't really have anything else resembling any kind of like major like rotation reinforcements after Scott and Tidwell. Vassell does throw like great stuff, and there might just be an adjustment period that he needs to get to, because he did pitch well in Double-A, but not like amazingly well. He definitely not as well as Christian Scott did, and he didn't comport himself nearly as well. Same for Dom Hamill. Hamill actually had a lot more success at Double-A than Vassell did. So, and has insane strikeout numbers in the minors. Considering he throws a very low velocity fastball, I'm not gonna get too much into Tom Hamill, but that guy is, I think, floated around as being another guy they can call up, but isn't quite there yet in terms of his adjustments to AAA pitching, and you definitely want to get him adjusted to AAA before you call him up to the major league level. The other thing is that the Mets farm system has gotten a lot of praise the way they kind of reloaded last year, and they brought in all these guys, and they had their guys that they were already set in, like Scott, but also Jet Williams and Colin Hawk and Kevin Parada and Blake Tidwell and so on. But also bringing in these other prospects, Drew Gilbert, Luis Angel Acuna, Ryan Clifford. They are all doing terribly. It has been a rough start for basically every prospect in the Mets farm system this season, and it's been so underwhelming that at a certain point you're just like, okay, these guys are going to actually start playing well, right? In the minor leagues, right? That's the whole thing, is that they have to play well in the minor leagues before they can come up to the major leagues. And I'm not lying. Every prospect that they have from AA on to AAA, it's been doing just terribly. All their top prospects are doing a horrendous job, with the exception of Christian Scott. Christian Scott was the clear outlier. Everyone's like, oh yeah, that guy's the only guy doing well, so that's why we called him up. Everyone else is just doing terribly, and so I certainly believe that Jet Williams and Drew Gilbert and Luciano Acuna, those guys are the top three prospects in the Mets farm system. Those three guys are going to be called up, and they will turn things around. They're just too talented not to. But it just means basically that there is really no hope coming at the foreseeable future. If you're just kind of underwhelmed by what we've been seeing from Jeff McNeil and from Brandon Nimmo's been in a really rough stretch right now, and given maybe too many at bats to someone like DJ Stewart, and Thomas Nito's not it doesn't feel like a guy who should be starting every fifth day or whatever. It definitely feels like they could bring in some new guys in this regard. It's just to say that they're not getting any kind of help anytime soon, and what we have right now is kind of what you got. And what they have right now is a 16-17 team, and certainly running into the Rays at this juncture was not the best thing, because they just come off a tough series, against the Cubs. Saw very dramatic wins late in games, and you run into the Rays, who are kind of a different animal. The Rays are just don't have a much better record than the Mets, but are just that team that you just can't really count out ever. That's a team that I'm like, oh yeah, but they'll win 90 games. I have no doubt that the Rays will win 90 games at the end of this year. And when you run into them, it's just the level of pitching, the level of hitting, the level of defense. It's just all very good, and they just know how to coach. They know how to do everything. The Rays model is probably the most underrated model in all of professional sports. They just do it with almost no star players and nothing that could be resembling a high-priced talent. They just do it, and they kind of just took the Oakland A's model and they did it. And this is basically, the Rays are just a most professional franchise that you'll find. They're consistent. They just do it every year. And the Mets run into them. You kind of see the different junctures that these two franchises are at, which is that the Mets are in kind of this weird holding pattern where they haven't really committed either way to what players that they want to be at the future, because we're in this weird split period where you have guys like Christian Scott, who are undeniably the future of that rotation. But then you also have guys like Jose Quintana, who completely blows it in the first game, and then you're thinking to yourself, okay, so Quintana, which is a guy who's supposed to be the number 2 or 1 starter on this staff, if he's blowing it this badly, and this is a guy that we thought was going to be one of our best pitchers this year, what do we have then in this case? Is Christian Scott really the guy who has to take this rotation into the future? And does he have to be the one who can take him to a potential playoff spot. I don't know. Christian Scott looks terrific, but I just don't know if he has that kind of longevity to him. I truly don't know. I've never seen somebody get called up and he hasn't pitched 100 professional innings in a season before. That's crazy. And at his age, he's 24 years old. I mean, to calling him up like that, it's just an amazing situation. And he has to step into this really tough period where he is going to be asked to be doing a lot, because what they're getting from Adrian Hauser isn't really enough. What they're getting from Sean Manaea, although Manea's been pretty solid for them, has not been quite enough. And Quintana's just been kind of up and down. And Quintana and everything, what we received from Quintana is that there's probably some kind of underlying issue, that he might be going down at some point. And they don't have Kodai Senga back yet, and Senga might be back in the next couple of weeks, but that's certainly dependent on his rehab progress also. So you're kind of in this weird weeds situation where you might be relying more on Christian Scott than they probably would prefer. Scott is, I think, the future of this rotation. It's one star. I'm not going to overblow it and say that this guy is Rookie of the Year material or anything like that. This guy's the future ace of this rotation. But what I saw gave me a lot of feelings, a lot of them very positive. I was very impressed. It was just a far better debut than I could have ever expected from him. And when you have somebody called up like that and they perform well, it's natural to feel like you just saw the birth of an ace. And I don't want to dab too much cold water on what Met fans might think about it, but there is certainly the feeling that this guy he could regress. There's things that in his makeup that people aren't quite sure about. The home run ball, if you're having trouble with it in AAA, then you're going to have trouble with it in Major League Baseball. It's just a fact. How well he conforms himself to doing that at the Major League level is dependent on him, and we'll see. But it was an incredible debut. It's probably the only incredible debut that we're going to be seeing from a Mets prospect this year. I won't guarantee that, but it seems likely that anybody that gets called up this year is going to be not going to perform nearly as well as Christian Scott did. And I'm encouraged, cautious, but encouraged by what we've seen thus far from him. And I'm very excited for his next start. I think he is a very impressive young guy. Who has all the tools, all the talent, all the confidence, and confidence being key for him. If he has that for the foreseeable future, for the rest of the season, the Mets might be able to kind of just stick it with him and be able to find something around him. Because and maybe they can score some runs for him next time. That would be also great. But he is a building block for the future for this franchise, clearly, and future's bright.
Thank you for listening to Mike's Mets Podcast. Please be sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Finally, please also follow the podcast Twitter, which is Mike's Mets Pod, all one word. Appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Let's go, Mets.